Hello, hello, and welcome to this edition of the Law Firm Blueprint. I'm one of your hosts, Jay Ruane, and with me, as always, is Seth Price. Seth down in his DC office. Seth, you've been all over the place. I see you on Facebook. You're going up to Syracuse, dropping off your son. You're back in the office today. How's your week going?
It's going really good. Got the eldest is off. He's launched the fall college of sport management. Sport. He's doing sports management. Couldn't be more excited. And look, I go and it's when you drop your kid off, um, it's like a $400,000 nut you're signing up
Yeah.
for, one way or the other, right? Not all of it's going to the university, but all in, it's about 400,000. You start to think about it, like ROI, and like I'm blessed that we have the resources to do it. I know that if you have very limited resources, it's not as high a nut, but it starts to make you think. And the thing that I was impressed about Syracuse, like they don't pretend to be an Ivy. Their schools that are elite are the communication school. They have sport management. They have a business school. So basically, when you speak to people there, I know the majors when I went to UPenn were all, I mean, they were pre-med and there was things like that, but there were a ton of kids with majors on like crazy nonsense that would never make a buck in life. Now, liberal arts education, good foundation, do a lot with it. But I think that Syracuse has sort of recognized, hey, we're at that level where the network matters. Make sure that people get a good, solid, basic, general education. But
Sure.
if we don't train people to do things, and so I was very impressed that way.
That's awesome. And I mean, the cool thing about it is, these larger universities have the smaller programs, so everybody gets to know each other in their field for the future, and they can start building their network immediately. I mean, I didn't
So,
really
and
build a network
I
with
did a
history
LinkedIn
majors.
post on this. One of our friends' kids, who's a year ahead of him there, amazing kid. His dream is to be an NFL special teams coach or something. He wants to be a coach, and this kid is not. He's a 5'7", very nice kid who basically has a spreadsheet of contacts, you know, who he's reached out to, who's contacted back, who he's had one contact with, went to contact again. And he is, in addition to paying his dues with the scut work on the Syracuse football team special teams group, he has built a network and is looking at it the way lawyers should be. All the stuff that John Fisher talks about, you talk about, you know, who's next on the haircut list if you're a
Yeah.
listener of the show, right? Have you touched and in what order? And in a really positive way. The stuff we discussed when I had dinner with him a few months back was how do you take that list, maybe put a podcast, so now you're adding some value, giving them some visibility. But the way that these kids are looking at it, and to me, whether or not he ever becomes a football coach, hope he does, hope he follows his dream. But if you can network in that
Sure.
way, you're going to be successful with anything you do.
Well, it's interesting that you bring that up because it seems like these younger generation, the ones that are driven, but there is an also a class of people who are just sort of waiting for stuff to happen for them. And everyone poo-poos it and says, "Oh, these young people that don't have it." But if I look back at my generation, the Gen Xers or your generation, the baby boomers, Seth, if we look
We're
back,
like 2 years. We know we're 2 years apart, right?
I know I had to get the dig in there. But think about it. Like you always knew who were the hustlers and who weren't. And I don't know. It's interesting. I saw a show over the last couple of weeks. I watched it with my wife. It's on Peacock. It's the 5 Star Weekend with Jennifer Garner. My wife's a huge Jennifer Garner fan. And there's a very driven character in the show. She's an agent, lawyer agent, and she made a passing reference that this younger generation mistakes um, boundaries for lack of work ethic. And so she says, "Oh, you keep saying, oh, it's boundaries. You need work-life balance on the thing, but you got to hustle." And I like saw that, and it perked up. And I really thought that was something interesting because, when you're young, I get it. You want to have a life, but you're also supposed to be grinding and putting it
It's
ahead. And I think about it now. Like, I mean, with AI, I'm working more than ever. I'm not working less. I'm making more
And it's
productive
like
work.
it's funny. People make fun of me of the younger generation within work circles as the grind economy they call my world,
Yeah.
and I'm like, but it's
But
those
that's every job,
connections.
right?
I like it is. I mean, it depends whether you want a job or whether you want to build something. If you're building something, there was that famous sort of interview with the now former CEO of Starbucks, who said if somebody calls me at 6 o'clock, it better be for a good reason, and he got crushed. And again, it shouldn't be that you have no life, and like maybe academically that's right, but look what happened on his watch. Like there's a certain amount that just my love partner always talks about just going slightly better than mediocrity. And it's like you have an amazing track in life.
Well, and um that makes me wonder though, is it that we are looking back through rose-colored glasses saying, "Oh, our generation had it and this generation doesn't?" Or is it 10%, 20%, 12%, whatever the number is of a population that will always be those hustlers? And so it really doesn't matter what generation you're from because I see young people who want to build, I see young people who want to coast. That type of thing. And
Well,
maybe
there's also look, we've seen, and we're starting to see it more in law and digital law or marketing of law, but we're also seeing it like media, right? So one of the big schools at Syracuse deals with media communications, TV, radio, whatever's left of TV. So the kids graduating, they aren't, look, there's a whole sports broadcasting division. So these guys want to broadcast a game, assuming AI commentators don't take over. But the idea that what I'm seeing kids come out. One family friend who just graduated, he wants to be an interviewer, and there's not a straight path. You're not going to just
no,
stand up and take over Costas's slot. He's on his own at the basketball Hall of Fame. Getting interviews, creating content, building his own, and like anything else, 10,000 hours. If you do this for a while and you get really good at it, but there's no sugarcoating the fact that some of the major slots go through nepotism, right or wrong.
right.
But the other ones are you going to be out there on a Friday night at 9 o'clock honing your craft on a show nobody's watching to get yourself to the point? And do you have the bankroll to get yourself there? Because it may
Right.
be a lot of lean years before you see anything. But I think what I'm most impressed with is that people are recognizing the path is not straight. May not what they're starting on may not even yet exist for where they're going to end up. Look at us, right?
Yeah, I mean, the path to where I'm sitting today didn't really exist in the criminal defense space in 1999, 1998 in Connecticut. I don't even know if it existed anywhere. And we sort of had to forage for ourselves. I know you did too, with the machete cutting down the stuff in front of you. But that leads me to the follow up in the context of how do you how do you find those people that like really want to be the best reception team,
Well, okay,
or
this,
do those
no, no.
people not exist?
Well, and
And
you got to
so,
be careful because if they found a Jay Ruane, he's not sticking around. That's the
right.
worst part. That's why I'm certain. Like I went to UPenn. I can't take a UPenn resume for the most part because they want to dabble. They're going to go to Europe for a year. They'll go to a hedge fund for like whatever it is. You don't want somebody dabbling. You need somebody solving your problems as an entrepreneur.
Okay, so
Um,
that brings me to the question then today. We hear it all the time. You only want A players. And the question I have for you is, can you have a law firm that only has A players in every seat? And I don't think it's possible. And I don't think it's necessarily the right thing to have only A players. Do I want only A players in my legal? Absolutely. I want people who are, client centric, educated, whip smart when it comes to things. But, for the copy clerk, for the person who's organizing discovery, do I need an A
no,
player?
but I
Do I
think
need
it's
an A
look.
player?
A lot of this is nuanced, like most things. I want to say it depends because you'll get
Oh, here we
but
go. Depends.
look, there's an A person for that copy job. That person may not be innovative. They may not figure out how to problem solve. You wish they could, but if they literally just show up every day
Yeah, it's
and
showing up at
they're
A
and they're
player.
and they're not toxic, and they care. You'll fill in a lot of gaps. But you know what? I'm going to bring this because I think I'm going to land the plane with it. No pun intended. So American Airlines. I'm in DCA. It's convenient to my house. Have status. Always late. And you come into DC at night, and it's almost comical. There are four things that have to happen when you land when the plane comes in. God forbid it gets in safely. It wasn't on time, several hours late with weather and everything else. But you need a gate assigned to you, not a
Yep.
given in DC. You need a ramp crew to bring it into the gate, not a given they're going to be there. Last night we got the first two. No gate agent to bring the jet bridge out.
Oh
20,
God.
25 minutes, right? And the fourth, FU is luggage if you checked anything, God forbid, late night, DC and BWI, awful. Just why? So what struck me while waiting 25 minutes for probably the 10th time in the last 2.5 years, where for no reason other than a body was not there for a joystick. And I'm thinking to myself, in a perfect world, if the joystick was remote, why does the guy have to be at the end of the jet bridge to do this if you had cameras and sensors, theoretically, right? Or why can't we have a drone that brings it, whatever it is? The idea, we're still at a point where there's a limitation. And I'm assuming for a second, I'm going to take the positive route that it's not they don't want to pay for it. They can't get enough good people who will schlep to Arlington, Virginia in the evening hours into the overnight, not a desirous one if you have family, to do these different variety of jobs. And that's where it started striking me, which is we talk about A players, but how many A players, and you're in a suburban market, you have certain advantages, want to get to where you are. We both know over the years, some of our A players have moved to other jurisdictions.
Mm-hmm.
And we generally say, sure, we know you're an A player. We'll keep you where you go there. And in one sense, the words of John Morgan come in, like work from home's nonsense, not working, if you call it work from home. At the same time, in DC this summer, we had the metro close down 3 stops, which meant you got off the metro commuting in from Maryland, got on a shuttle bus for 3 stops, got back off the shuttle bus, back onto the metro and back to work. Crazy, right? You have people coming in from people are now living an hour and 20 minutes into Virginia. We now, out my window, have the National Guard perimeter security because they're putting on a I don't know, NASCAR race, some sort of race on the National Mall in a week or so. My point is there's so many obstacles to getting people in the office. And I'm sort of now almost the opposite, which is, am I protesting too hard am I delusional to think I can quote unquote get an A player who over years is going to make the schlep to a difficult place to do their job? How long can that sustain? And are we at the point where certain jobs, yes, have to be there? But are we at the point, we've seen it with international labor, we're leveraging AI. Should we be looking at more of a national and global workforce wherever possible, limiting the number of people in office? Now, there's culture, there are benefits, but I'm sitting there, I'm sitting on a plane with a whole bunch of other people for no reason for the 10th time trying to get to a gate. If American Airlines with all these resources can't figure it out, who am I to think that we can keep paralegals for an extended life, in a competitive market? I know if you're in a Detroit, for example, less economic opportunities, maybe you can do that. But are we at the point where you're looking, if you want to get closer to the amorphous A player, that we need to look nationally and limit the number of things that are being done physically in the office? I don't know. I'll throw this back to you.
Yeah, and I mean that's a really good question. I mean, the reality is I think the first thing you need to do when you're sitting down identifying a role that needs to be filled is ask the question, is this hybrid, in office, or remote? And have an honest conversation with your people, because you might find that no, this is like we have a roll up right now, right? We're starting the process with an eye towards hiring and onboarding for January 1, right? So we're starting the process now. It's the end of August. We figure a 3-month timeline is good for us to get us where we want to be. And the conversation we had last week in my level 10, my leadership meeting was, is this hybrid or in office? We knew it wasn't remote. right? And the conversation really revolved around, well, if it's hybrid, we can expand our geographic area, because if someone's coming in 2 or 3 days a week, they may be a better quality candidate, more likely to come,
But
versus somebody who has to come every day.
I'm going to push you into the visionary seat. You're assuming that you have to go within your normal rules. Why can't a person from Oklahoma that can get a nonstop flight to Kennedy, or whatever,
Right.
why can't you make it where the person comes in for a week of training? They come in 2, 3 times a year. That's not the normal hybrid, but are we at the point? This is, when I'm looking at it, you only learn this when somebody quits and you sort of figure out what you're dealing with. Now, there's consequences of it. But if 90% of a paralegal, take family law paralegal, could be done remotely, hypothetically, with somebody, assuming they're actually working, they're doing it, and you could get a rock star somewhere in the United States, are you better off hiring some admin around the office? The 10% that has to be done in person, 5% will be done by an admin when it can be, and 5% will be sucked up by the lawyer, right? Meaning, if you could get high quality for 90%, would you be better off for the lawyer in the long run? Like, meaning you're going back and saying hybrid versus this versus that. I'm throwing it all out and saying, should it be the best player on the draft board, and not looking at those? Now, California probably a lot harder, but
Sure.
is a 1 hour flight acceptable for a quarterly visit?
Oh,
And
I think that's
and
absolutely. I mean, we
and
have an
under
attorney who
right.
who is in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and comes in quarterly, and will come in for trials. But all the other
Right.
stuff is
And
done remotely.
how did that come to be? How did you end up with that
So he was
person?
a law student with us during COVID, and we got very comfortable with him working remotely. And he worked on some of these files, and then he said, "Look,
And
my girlfriend has an opportunity as a dentist in Oklahoma. I want to move there. What can we make happen?"
understood. And when I look around my law firm, the people that have been with us 10 years plus, or are tracking towards 10 years, are people that may have started out for a couple of years in office, but fled for whatever personal reason. And to me, I'm like, okay, we got comfortable with it. God forbid we could somehow interview well enough, get the bar high enough, have people come for some week, 2 weeks, pick your poison, get comfortable enough with them. Could we truncate that so that we were, and again, negatives, you got to do tax returns all over the country. You have some people that will be asleep at the wheel, out of sight, out of mind. But to me, I just saw a resume today for a manager that it blew it hurt, because they were the best of the, I don't know, 4 to 7 candidates they had screened. And I looked at this person, and they had 9 to 12 months consistently on their resume for 15 years, a nonprofit for the last couple of years, which is normally game over. Just, you can't, but they had for profit, and 5 years. This is the part where I've seen this movie before, as a quote unquote consultant, which means if your resume has 9 month tenures all over it, imagine what they're hiding to show me they were a consultant for 5 years.
Right.
If you weren't even smart enough to combine 2 of those jobs from 18 years ago, give 3 months more to 2 jobs and make one disappear. If you literally are showing me 9 months, 12 months, 8 months on a resume consistently, and then 5 years as a consultant, imagine what's beneath the surface there. I've seen it. I've had it. Marketing people multiple times. And the moment they quit on a no notice 2 months in, you're going to see that their resume, their LinkedIn goes straight back to consultant. It never left. And to me, I'm like, how do I have a shot? You see some of these amazing firms, usually in more economically downtrodden markets, that have amazing tenure for people. How can I try to keep people in the fold? Now, downside, the people that started with you, there is some bonding and loyalty that goes on. But
Yeah.
if you could get the right person, pay them the right amount, they don't have commuting time, am I all of a sudden, despite John Morgan telling me those, if you get the person who's actually going to work,
Well,
is this now the direction I should be looking at?
I hate to sound like Seth Price here, folks, but I'm going to say it depends. And I think it depends on what your culture is. I think it depends on the type of practice that you have. And I'm not saying the practice area. I'm saying the type of practice that you have. For what John Morgan has, and his culture and his people and the pressures and the KPIs that he has, maybe he can't make remote work, but maybe you're a firm of, 12 people and you can make that work. And I think that's one of the things that I think you need to take into consideration. I mean, I think your firm obviously is bigger than mine. You may have different roles and different needs than my firm has, and my firm is bigger than some other firms. And we may, and so the solo, who's making his first hire, remote may not be the best thing for him. It may be you need to be with me so we can figure out our system.
Right. And that's okay. So the people we can get in house that are willing to schlep to the office are junior, more green people.
Yes.
I'm talking about, and I'm talking about for me, a practice group we are building out, not one of our established ones where there's a sort of a cadence in PI or a known quantity and people like working here, et cetera.
Right.
But in some of our startup areas, you don't have that. Like think back to as you were building and you don't have that same cadence. And I'm sitting there. I spoke to Marco Brown this morning, just looking for some family law guidance. And it's like, I think the key is until you get a person who can train the people, that is the missing piece for most law firms. That if you have a person, whether it's Jay, and at this point it's not Jay, but if you have a person who can train staff, it allows you to leverage international a lot more. Yeah. It allows you to go virtual a lot more because there's a checks and balances. But the piece that I hate, and I heard this as a PTSD from this from early days of building PI, we want experienced people. When you get that lady with the, with literally, I think, a dozen different opportunities over the last, 10 years on the resume, that's the experienced person. And I'm like, now, occasionally you pick somebody off another firm.
Train wreck because they've only lasted 9 months. And the experienced person comes with a lot of bad habits.
Like when you look at a Cravath, place that I started my career way back coming out of college, they historically did not take laterals. You learn the Cravath way from day one. How do you format a letter? Everything. And I think they've broken that since. But for many, many years, it was lockstep. First year, up to 8, up or out.
So let me ask you a question then, because we've really just started to, we've had fits and starts of it, and we've had a couple different ways to approach it, but we really sort of formalized our onboarding and training program. At what point do you need to bring in somebody whose job it is to train the new hires? Because a lot of people, I think, in our audience are great. We have a new hire. Here's your desk. Here's your phone. Good luck.
Well, so, okay. So look, and as we grew, we did have we had 2 full-time trainers, full-time trainer. It's an expensive piece.
Yeah.
And there are two components to it. There's the first day nicey nice policies and procedures. But what I really need, and I think that's what we morphed our trainer to, is processes and procedures per seat. Because only then can you replicate. It's not the trainer as far as, here's the benefits here. All of that we'll figure out, right? Plenty of firms don't do that well and they still survive. But if there's a way to bring in people that aren't quote unquote experienced, that don't have the best, like that is the ultimate. And now look, my current look is I'm actually, there are enough people who've done this for long enough. Are there international players, some with law degrees, who have worked at a law firm where they have enough experience generally that the training won't be as harsh? And to me, one of the things we've talked about a lot over the years is, does somebody actually want to do that job? That's the greatest risk of first-year attorneys.
Well, and how do you parse through those people in the interview process that are great interviewers but terrible at executing the job? We've both had that person sitting across the table from us, and you're like, "Wow, this person's gonna rock. This is great. My problems are solved." And 3.5 weeks in, you're like, "What the hell did I hire?" Like that's it's
right, which is why I'm like you almost want to hire for traits if you get somebody who's attention to detail who actually has it. But look,
but everyone's going to tell you that they have that in their interview. how do you measure
No,
that
no, I'm
in
sure you well
advance?
testing. We look over the years, we've done test. Look, way back in the day when everything was in person, we used to have people sit with them for half a day, literally do the
Right.
job here. I'll
Oh
show them
yeah,
for half a day and then
we
do some
love
tests.
we love those, shadow
You
days.
know, and look, they're testing, and then you stop using the testing. The struggle is real. There's a lot of academic that's right, um, but it is, I think to a certain extent, it goes back. We talked about, how like J. Ruane time, like what's the most important use of it. But if you're able to get those people in place, and you have a person, whoever that person is, who could then train and develop those people, that's a huge competitive advantage as far as scaling. And until you have that, you're just putting bodies in places and hoping that it works out.
Yeah, and I mean, the biggest challenge of running a law firm is managing people. It's not getting
No,
cases.
no, and
It's
spoiler
not
alert: BluShark
satisfying the
Digital, no
client.
different. If you remember, I did a thing, and you were watching the video. First day, I put a little sign on my desk at BluShark when we started. It's an HR play. If I
Yeah,
can staff, it'll be successful. It's all the execution of a vision.
and I wonder is the fact that firms are successful, is it pure luck? Because I mean, I've talked to dozens of lawyers early in the game of their scaling, and I've talked to, hundreds of people after they've scaled. And the people after they've scaled always seem to say it's when HR came into play and we had objective metrics for hiring people and that type of thing. But a lot of times the younger people are like, well, I'm just doing it myself because I don't have the resources. I don't have the that type of thing. And is, you know, okay, so I'm gonna draw a corollary here, and let me get your input on it. I know there are some big players in the national PI market that have, they go into massive debt as they're building their cases and their branding and their marketing, and they'll spend money on marketing and they'll take a credit line and spend money on marketing because they know that that's going to yield money down the line. Is going into debt to hire the right people or hire the right person to help you get the right people, is that similarly something that you should be considering? Because I know I wouldn't have done it. I probably still wouldn't do it. But maybe, just maybe,
I'm
you
very
know,
we've been working with credit lines now for case costs, things like that, and over the last couple of years we were late to the game on it. The piece that scares me outside of PI, if you know you have assets, no big deal, you're going to get paid back.
right.
It's there. But if you're putting money against things that don't have assets, you've made this point over the years repeatedly, which is you have to capitalize yourself to build any business, restaurant, right?
Yeah.
You go in with that piece. Um, we have seen, like, history is written by the victor. You have a good business plan. Is there an example where borrowing money to get the right person, if they stay, if it's the right person, if that person could be, maybe, but I think more often than not, the right hustler, going back to the hustle culture, is going to find a way to eke out enough money, take a little bit less for themselves to put that person in place. That if you're going to debt in a non-contingency place to do that, that's a scary place to be.
It
Now,
is scary.
they should have capitalized, theoretically, whatever that means, but what is the business plan? And again, it scares me a lot, and I don't want to be the person advocating for putting credit lines out there to build something, knowing that the first person may not be right, the second person, it may be the third person. So to me, that's a scary place to be.
It is for me too. I'm in a unique position. As many of the listeners know, I have done some post conviction work. One of the cases where we got a young man out. Well, he wasn't young. He was young when he went in. He was middle aged by the time he got out. We got him out. It was set to go to trial in 2 weeks against the city of New Haven, and last week they announced the settlement, which will pay him $1 million for every year he was in jail, which is fantastic for him. He deserves every dollar of it. I'm lucky I'm going to be getting a piece of that. And so now I've got this sort of unnatural windfall into my firm, and I have to make some major decisions on how do I take this. Do I take it as profit, which I could do, and say, this isn't what I normally do, so it's a windfall, and I get the lion's share of it because it's the benefits of being the owner. Or do I invest in more people, new people, different people? Do I expand my operation? Do I take on another state? Because there's some opportunities that I've recently been talking to people about. So I've got to do some deep soul searching on what I want to be when I grow up, because I'm very comfortable and happy where I am right now. And I don't know if I want to necessarily be the one on the ships, exploring, trying to do something. But I could put other people in those roles and have them do it for me now that I've got some funds to just throw at it. So I'm really
Right, but like anything else, if you're throwing at it's not the answer. If you're like, hey, this trainer I would never have paid for before, but I can take a 6 figures less income next year because of it. What I hope it lets you do is take some educated risks or chances.
Yeah, and that's the question I have. Like, what? I mean, also, we have a practice area. It's interesting. I put up a website during COVID, and just we did it internally. We wrote our own content for it, and it's generating 5 to 10 calls a week organically. And we have never touched it. We had a lawyer that was in that role who left us in 2023, before it really started to generate calls, and now it is. So I could take some money, hire a lawyer that can do that area of law, and see if I can monetize that.
Time out. Look, I know we got to wrap this up, but I'm not buying this. The question shouldn't be because you got a windfall. Just take it, don't take it, whatever you want to do. Well, but to me, is it a smart area that has potential for growth? Is it going to distract you from other stuff? Great. You have those many calls. What would it take to get more? Right now, we're seeing paid search being prohibitive in a lot of fee-for-service markets.
Yeah.
So next thing you know, you build out something more digitally. That's never where you've invested. You've done it through sweat equity for most of your career.
I think it's time to do the digital stuff, but it's just, I don't know. See, that's part of the thing. We laugh about this offline. We talk about how it's therapy for both of us, but in reality, I think what do you want to be when you grow up conversation is something that you almost have to have every year. Because what I wanted to be when I was
periodically, because it does change.
We
just both came off 3 weeks in Europe. It changes your mindset.
I just booked 2 weeks in Alaska next year. And I'm happy with that. And I don't necessarily want to work more. It was different when I was 30.
I got to tell you, but let me flip it back on you. Big deal. January takes 2 weeks of vacation. That's not the issue. What I see a lot of people doing is they really want to work 10 to 2, 3 days a week. Those are the life moments where things change. In fact, you want to take 2 weeks vacation, you probably should have been doing it for a long time.
Probably. But I'm gonna leave work a little early tomorrow. Take my son into New York City. My son has gotten bitten by the acting bug. He's a freshman in high school going into his sophomore year. And so I'm going to take him to go see Book of Mormon, and have some steak in New York City.
Favorites.
So I'm excited.
Where are you going for steak?
So I think we're going to go do Relais de Venise. It's a bit of a chain. They had it in Paris. They have it in New York City. It is steak frites only.
Oh, well, then I'll give you my spot for that.
Okay.
Medium rare. Okay. It's 33rd and 3rd. Is a buddy of mine named Mark Bucher. He has about 20 of them around the country now. He's putting them in NFL cities. So any city with an NFL team gets one. He started in DC with about 3, and they're in Philly, New York, Dallas, a bunch of all these things. And he went to Paris with his kids and saw this and said, I got to bring it back. And they have their own secret sauce, all's on the menu, 2 portions of steak frites, 30 some odd dollars.
Yeah.
Medium rare.
All right. I'm going to check that out then. I'm going to look, as soon as we get off here, I'm going to look that up, get myself a table, and that's our plan.
There you go. Well, look, this has been great. And until next week.
It's good to be back, folks. That's going to do it for us here on the Law Firm Blueprint. Of course, you can catch us anytime you want on the go by subscribing to the Law Firm Blueprint podcast, wherever you get your podcast. I get mine from Apple. Seth gets his from Google, I guess, Google Podcast. And you can catch us live on LinkedIn, 3 p.m. Eastern, 12 p.m. Pacific, as well as in our Facebook group every Thursday. So Thursdays live, LinkedIn and Facebook group, 3 p.m. Eastern, 12 p.m. Pacific. That'll do it for us today. I am Jay. He is Seth. Bye for now.